Hey everybody, welcome back to IDP Plus Trends. I'm your host Johnny, and on this episode, I am going to help you find some great value picks at the defensive back and linebacker positions for your upcoming IDP fantasy football drafts this year. Right now, it's the end of July, which means NFL training camp has already kicked off. Hopefully, your fantasy research has too. But if not, don't worry, sit back, relax, and chill. I got you covered with some great value picks. Before we get started, I wanted to mention the website Trophy Smack. If you see this nice trophy sitting behind me, you can get one just like it at trophysmack.com. And not only does Trophy Smack have a great selection of fantasy football and other sports trophies, they also have a draft board for your league this year so deep they claim that you will not have to write another draft pick in again. So those days of writing in undrafted players that are unknown, I should say, are gone. Check out the link in the description to get your draft board today. Now, what I'm going to do first is take a look at the defensive back position. I'm going to pull up Fantasy Pros. This is a great ranking website. I'm sure you've heard of it. If you're here, you're doing your deep research. But I'm going to give you, first off, my opinion on drafting defensive backs, and that is don't put too much stock into these guys. Unless you're in a very deep league, I don't see the need really to draft defensive backs too heavily or too early. So this first tier, we have Antoine Winfield. To me, he's my number one too. He's a great player, but I'm not going to draft him probably in any leagues this year. Nobody inside this top tier, top four players: Winfield, Derwin James, Kyle Hamilton, Jaquan Brisker, all great players. I'm not saying that they don't deserve to be there because they definitely do, but just too rich for my taste. Let somebody else jump on them. I'm actually not even going to touch anybody in tier 2 as well. Budda Baker, Minka Fitzpatrick, Kyle Duggar, Jesse Bates, Brian Branch. There's our first cornerback, and I love Brian Branch too, but they also have some other guys there in Detroit playing in that defensive backfield that, kind of limit his upside. I mean, we saw what he did last year. This year, he kind of is switching roles between cornerback and safety. We'll see how that goes for him. If it pays off for somebody, so be it. Congratulations to that person. It's just not going to be me. Moving into tier 3, we have Xavier McKinney. I'm kind of low on him. I don't really believe in Green Bay defensive backs having success. I'll be willing to be proven wrong on that one. Cam Curl switches teams. I really liked him for Washington, but not so much at this price tag, number 11 overall, and playing for LA, the Rams. Now, number 12, boom. This is my first guy I'm going to touch on. My number one guy who I'd be willing to pay this price tag for. I think this is a value pick, and that's Julian Love. And I'll tell you what, Julian Love last year in his 17 games played, he had 123 tackles, average of 7.2 a game, which is tremendous for a defensive back. And that's really what I look at. Is I look at the tackles. I'm not somebody who gets enamored by the Antoine Winfield 6 sacks. I don't care really. It's nice that he had 6 sacks. That's great. Helps the team. Helps my fantasy team too. But it really doesn't. It's not bankable. Having something happen 6 times out of 17 games is really tough to predict, and I doubt he does that again. So most of my, these picks, these value picks are going to come off based off tackle numbers. And Julian Love, man, he fits that bill tremendously. 7.2 tackles a game is more than what you need to get you by, and this is not a top 10 price tag to pay. If you're in a league that you maybe get premium points for interceptions, he's helping you there too. We got 4 last year. He also had a tackle for loss, 10 pass defense, which I know there's leagues out there that get over 1 point for a pass defense. So that's going to be tremendous help for your fantasy squads. He didn't have a sack last year. Again, that's not something that I hold against the defensive back. You don't have to do that to be a top-tier defensive back in my eyes. But he did have 2 forced fumbles. So overall, Julian Love is a very bankable, safe play as far as tackles go. That's my biggest concern. But he also is not going to hurt you elsewhere. He's going to get you those splash plays. He had 2 forced fumbles last year. I bet he builds on that number this year. They brought in Jerome Baker at the linebacker position. They brought in Tyrell Dodson. But to me, that's not Jordan Brooks and Bobby Wagner. Those days are over. There's going to be, I think, more tackles available for Julian Love. And he had 123 last year, more tackles available. More the reason why I like Julian Love. I love Julian Love, pun intended on that one. So at number 12, if you're in a 12-man league and he's the 12th guy off the board to your team, I think you got a top 10 at least defensive back with that pick. So I think there's great value in number 12, Julian Love. Moving on, we got Josh Metellus is a guy at number 14 who I really like. Josh Metellus, a lot of people have scares about, is he really going to play, the safety role that much? This year they have three tremendous safeties. They have Metellus, Bynum, they have Harrison Smith too. Based on what he did last year, he averaged 6.8 tackles in 17 games for a grand total of 116. You look at a guy who had 7 tackles for loss. I mean, he was in the backfield almost, on a gamely basis. He had 2.5 sacks. Those numbers could have been higher. So this is a guy who's not only getting you a safe tackle floor of 6.5, over 6.5 a game, but he's also getting you many points in other regards too. He had 4 forced fumbles last year, tremendous. 7 tackles for loss, which I had mentioned already. 5 pass defense. So if Josh Metellus can not only hit this mark again and put up the same number, I think he's great value at 14. But I think Harrison Smith is only getting older. He's in his mid 30s now, and I think if there's one guy who takes the back seat in this backfield, I think it's going to be Harrison Smith. He's going to be a tremendous leader. He's a tremendous player on the team, on a great Vikings defense. But I just don't think that Josh Metellus is going to, take any loss this year with Harrison Smith getting 1 year older. So at number 14, I think Josh Metellus is a safe pick here. Hella upside. He's somebody who can get 8-10 tackles a game, as well as a couple splash plays in there. And he's not a complete zero in sacks and forced fumbles. He's actually going to help you in that regard. One of the highest of my value picks here. So Josh Metellus, I really like him at number 14. Going to my next pick at number 16, and that is Cameron Bynum on the same team, Minnesota. I'm hunting both of these guys this year. Again, I'm not worried with the Harrison Smith, presence there. I think Harrison Smith's the one that's fantasy value is going to be nullified the most out of these three. They each played, I want to say, 900 or more snaps. The only defensive backfield trio that hit that mark last year. So that was with Harrison Smith playing 900 snaps. I don't know if he can hold up for that much this year. So Cameron Bynum, I mean, it took him a while to get going. Last year was his best year by far, and what a tremendous year it was. In 17 games played, he had 137 tackles, an average of 8.6, which is actually the highest of all my defensive backs as far as average tackles per game. And that's really all you got to do in my book is you got to get those tackles. And he did that at a safe rate. He also had 2 picks, I believe, in the same game. So not somebody who, you're going to chase interceptions with here. Again, maybe the Chuck Clark gets you, I think, what did he have, 6 or 7 interceptions, and that was the most by a defensive back, by a safety last year. So, again, not something that's a make or break to get interceptions. Cameron Bynum is still a multifaceted player. He had 9 pass defense. He also had 2 tackles for loss and a half a sack. So not somebody who's playing by the box all the time. And I hear a lot of people talking about you have to play box snap, high percentage to be a productive defensive back. But that's not where I come from, and that's not really how I see it. Half a sack is more than fine to me. I got guys on this list who don't even have a sack last year. So and also Cameron Bynum, he's a splash player guy. He had 2 picks in the same game. He also had 3 forced fumbles last year. And you know what? Again, like Metellus, if Cameron Bynum can replicate this year, he doesn't even have to do better. For me at number 16, if he can, the fact that he's 16 is I think is a dishonor to his name. Maybe people are thinking Harrison Smith. The fact that they have three competent safeties back there to drop Cameron Bynum to 16, but in my rankings, absolutely not. If I can get him at 16, this is probably my biggest smash value pick, and I don't think he's going to be 16 off the board. I think you might have to jump maybe top 8, top 10 for Cameron Bynum, but this is a guy who I definitely would make that jump top 10 easy. I think he's worth it, and the tackles speak for themselves. So to average over 8.5 tackles a game is tremendous, and I want every share of Cameron Bynum this year I can get. Moving on, I'm going to go down to number 19, and that is Julian Blackmon. Julian Blackmon didn't complete the full season. He got hurt. He played 15 games last year. Not going to break the break the bank as far as tackles. He averaged 5.8, a grand total of 88 in those 15 games. But I tell you what, Julian Blackmon is a ball hawk. I watched a couple of videos on Twitter. He actually had 4 interceptions, and that was only in 15 games. I watched one that went through his hands that might have been a pick 6. So this is a guy who not only gets a competent floor of tackles, he's a splash play guy too. 4 interceptions, 5 tackles for loss, 8 passes defense. He's very well versed in the pass game. And if you are somebody who's playing in a bit splash play, pass defense or getting 2 or more points, I think this is one guy you definitely want to look at. He's a safe floor as far as tackles, and he's had big games, but most of those games have come when he's had an interception or a couple pass defense. He is a 0 floor, 0 upside. I want to say maybe he has 1 or 2 sacks, but I would count on 0 again. He had 0 last year in 2023. No forced fumbles. Okay, that might happen once or twice, 4 times if you're Josh Metellus, but that's not going to kill you, man. Just play it safe here at number 19. If you're in a 12-man league, this is a low-end DB2 at this point, and I think Julian Blackmon has that floor. So I think at number 19, Julian Blackmon, if he would have played all 17 games, maybe he'd be a little bit higher than 19, but I love him here, and this is definitely some guy I'm going to consider as a value pick for my upcoming drafts. Moving on, I think a guy who's a little bit lower here at 22, Jevon Holland, was off to a tremendous year. In 12 games played before he got injured, he totaled 74 tackles for an average of 6.2 tackles a game. He also had a pick, 3 tackles for loss, 4 pass defense, no sacks, but 3 forced fumbles. And going back to Jevon Holland, I mean, he's always had a safe tackle floor. At one point, I think he had a 2 or 3 back-to-back double-digit tackle games. And if you're a defensive back and you can hit double digits a couple times a year, that's more than serviceable. So they got a new defensive coordinator, a new head coach there. I think it is defensive coordinator in Miami. So I've read reports he's excited for that new defensive coordinator. Maybe he had a bad taste in his mouth with the old coach, and I understand that. And maybe if he would have stayed on the field, things would have worked out for him a little bit better too. But he didn't. He only played 12 games, but I think the fact that he only played 12 games is a reason why he's sitting at 22 on this list. A year ago, we were talking about Jevon Holland as a top 8, top 10, especially dynasty safety. So I think that could come to fruition this year wholeheartly if he's able to stay healthy. And they lost to Sean Elliott. I think that's going to maybe hurt them a little bit. They bring in Jordan Poyer. Jordan Poyer is a little bit older now, age too. So I think Jevon Holland is in a really good spot at 22 to provide value, not only for the Miami Dolphins, but for your IDP leagues out there too. So again, if you're in a 12-man league, this is bottom of the barrel DB2 as far as what you're going to have to invest. So I like Jevon Holland a lot. I think he could possibly return into the DB1 ranking. So this is a guy who I'm definitely hunting a value pick here at 22. Moving on, I'm going to skip. We got some great players in between. We had Kevin Byard at 20. I still like him, but it's a little bit high price tag. Jalen Thompson's a good player. Has his spurts there, here and there, but he's a little bit inconsistent. I'd rather have Jevon Holland over both of those guys. Jalen Petrie, I'm down on. He had a big rookie year, but really let us down last year. And the linebackers in Houston seem to really carry the load there. So I don't know if the new coach D'Amico Ryans comes in. I'm out on Jalen Petrie. Witherspoon, another great cornerback, but it's tough to bank those tackles with a cornerback, even if you're in the slot. So Witherspoon, if you're in a cornerback specific league, if you have to roster a cornerback, he's definitely top 3-5. But as far as defensive backs as a whole, I think he's a little bit volatile. Moving on, my next guy I'm going to talk about, I'm going to skip tier 5 for the majority here and go to number 34, and that's Tyler Nubin. And listen, I don't have much stats to back up on Tyler Nubin. He's a rookie in this league. He's a newbie. So my hunch here on Tyler Nubin, why I think he's a value pick at 34. First off, this is a DB3 ranking, right? This is DB3 territory. And I think Tyler Nubin has a DB3 floor. Absolutely. I think he has tremendous upside. They have Jason Pinnock opposing him in the defensive backfield at the safety position, free safety. So I think Jason Pinnock is a guy, like if you're in a league where you get a lot of points for interceptions, maybe that's a guy who's on your radar. But I'm here for the tackles, like I said before. And I think Tyler Nubin's in a smash spot for that. We're talking about a team for the Giants. It's going to be pretty bad, I would imagine, this year. They're probably going to be, thrown on a good bit. Maybe they can stay in some games, but I wouldn't say they're like the worst team. They're going to get the ball run down their throat. They might stay competent. Maybe Daniel Jones and Malik Neighbors, take over the offense and they can stay competitive. But nonetheless, I think that defense is going to be on the field a lot, and I just have a gut feeling that Tyler Nubin is going to be in a prime position for tackles. That's the kind of player he was in college. And you know what? I think he's a lot of times we see these rookie defensive backs, hit the ground running. And as far as rookie defensive backs, he's my number one. So at 34, this is, if you're in a 12-man league, unless you're starting three defensive backs, he's probably not even going to get drafted. So boom, this is a guy who maybe is he has an ankle injury right now. Maybe he comes back healthy in a few days, in a week, and he's back on my radar. So, keep an eye on that ankle injury through training camp. But I think Tyler Nubin, if you're somebody who's like a zero defensive back guy, I think this is a great play for you here at 34 overall. If he falls that far, I think this is a great stab for you for IDP. And this is definitely a guy that maybe I draft like Javon Holland is my number one. If I have to start two defensive backs, Holland being my number one, and Tyler Nubin, as long as he gets the nod and is starting week one, I'll take a shot on him down this far. And guess what? My defensive backs might be a little bit weak. If it doesn't work out for Nubin, I drop in week two and pick somebody else up who's going to show dependability. But I think Tyler Nubin's in a great spot here for not only for the Giants, but your IDP teams as well. Moving on to my next guy, I'm going to go down to 38. So I'm going to skip a couple players here. I'm sorry, 37, and that's Amani Hooker. So Amani Hooker last season, he only played 13 games, and that's a kind of a kicker with Amani Hooker. He's kind of had the inability to stay healthy throughout his career, but it seems like as time has went on for Amani Hooker, he's been just better with experience, with age. Last season in those 13 games, he averaged 6.5 tackles per game for a total of 85, and that's really what I'm here for. I've said it many times. I'll say it again, is the tackles. He's somebody who's not really going to get splash plays. He only had 1 interception last year, 3 tackles for loss. He did have 7 pass defense, so that's not hurting you, but he had 0 sacks and 1 forced fumble. So not somebody who I expect to get a sack. Again, expect 0 in that regard, but it doesn't matter. If we're talking about a DB3, middle of the pack DB3, most of your leagues, we're not even drafting guys this deep unless you're in a crazy deep league. So if you are, I think Amani Hooker better be, a guy you're targeting for your draft. But if you're in a shallower league, a 10, 12, maybe even a 14-man league, I don't think Amani Hooker's drafted, but I could see week 3, 4. He has a couple nice weeks that I think he's going to be a nice waiver wire find for somebody. So you might as well, if you have a bench spot, you want to, take another defensive back. I think he's a great stab here at 38. Another thing about the situation in Tennessee, similar to how I said about Seattle, we lost Azeez Al-Shaair as the linebacker in Tennessee. Maybe, he was a dog. He made a lot of tackles there. I think he'll make a lot of tackles for Houston this year. But you're talking about a linebacking core right now that has like Cedric Gray, Jack Gibbons, and Kenneth Murray. To me, those are just guys. So I think there's going to be plenty of room for Amani Hooker not only to set the pace at 6.5 tackles a game, but maybe even improve on it. And if he can stay healthy, again, probably a reason why he's knocked down a peg at number 38 here. But if he can stay healthy, I think Amani Hooker is definitely a value pick at 38 overall. Now I have my last, surefire value pick before I mention some honorable mentions. And I'm going to move down the list a little bit more to number 44, and that is Taylor Rapp. Man, I've liked Taylor Rapp a lot over his career. I had him his rookie year. He was pretty dependable. He's not a guy that's going to lead the, defensive backs and tackles by any means, but I do think he's going to start this year for Buffalo. I liked him last year. I thought maybe he should have got more reps. And as the season went on, it seemed like Buffalo thought that too. He did. And I think this is his year. I think Taylor Rapp, not somebody who's going to break the bank as far as splash plays. I mean, let's waive last year. He was a part-time player. Let's take a look at 2022. He played 16 games. In those 16 games, he had 92 total tackles, which is an average of 5.8. Now, if you can hover right around 100 or more tackles, that's a great defensive back play in my book, and you're getting him for DB4 value here. So no price tag to pay. He is dirt cheap, and I think he's going to be worth it. I think he's going to perhaps make his way. If you're starting 2 defensive backs in a 12-man league, I think Taylor Rapp is going to creep up ownership, and he's going to actually be owned in those kind of leagues. He had 2 picks in 2022, 2 tackles for loss, 6 pass defense, no sacks, and no forced fumbles. So don't expect any of those sacks or forced fumbles. If you get 1 or 2, great. Maybe, he finds his stride here in Buffalo and the numbers do increase, but this is just a guy who's going to get reps. He's a great NFL player. and I think he's going to be a pretty damn good IDP player for the community out there. So Taylor Rapp is not really a household name in Buffalo right now, especially they got Cole Bishop. He's a little bit even further down these rankings. I'll mention him later. But I think Taylor Rapp is respectively the number one IDP projection to the number one get as far as defensive backs in Buffalo, and I think rightfully so. But 44 is, like I said, just so dirt cheap that this, again, if you're going to punt the position, this is a guy who could easily be my number 2 defensive back, and I think he's pretty dependable. I don't think he's really going to hurt you. Maybe a couple weeks that he'll get you only 7 or 8 points, maybe 5 or 6 tackles, and that's a light week for him. I think he's going to rack up the tackles here in Buffalo this year, and they have a great offense. They're going to be beating teams up, throwing the ball a lot, and I think their defense is going to be thrown on a lot. So Taylor Rapp's in a great spot this year to make it happen, get back to fantasy IDP relevance. Now, I mentioned those are my surefire defensive back values. I got some honorable mentions. I got a lot of them. Down the list to 54, you see now we have like Jimmy Ward, Geno Stone. I don't believe in him at all. Jordan Fuller, I kind of like. Alohi Gilman, Kyler Gordon, another cornerback who's a solid cornerback. Now we got PJ Locke, and he makes my honorable mention list. Actually, if I'm in a deeper defensive back, maybe if I'm starting 3 defensive backs or more, or if it's a 14 or 16 man league and you start 2 defensive backs, I think you can get away with PJ Locke to be your starter here at 54. So another guy who has, great late tremendous value. 54 is, DB4 territory. He's already been named the starting strong safety in Denver. Again, Denver, I think, is going to be a bad team. I think they're going to be on the field quite a bit. And this is not somebody who's a rookie who we don't know anything about. Last year in 2023, when he, I believe, replaced Justin Simmons, he actually started 8 games towards the middle of the season. And in those 8 games, he totaled 43 tackles as a starter, which is an average of 5.5. which I'm fine with. It's not going to, blow the top off. It's not going to lead the league by any means, but he did have 3 consecutive games with a sack. So anytime you get 4 or 5 tackles or more and you can get a sack, he did it 3 games in a row. I'm very intrigued there. PJ Locke, I'm sure if you're an IDP head out there, you maybe had him on your team or watched somebody else have him on their team and did pretty well in the middle of the season last year, given some injuries. This year, he's going to be the starter. So I think he has a solid tackle floor. He can make some big splash plays. So PJ Locke definitely makes my honorable mention. Moving on to number 57 is Jordan Battle. Now, Jordan Battle, he might be down here because, we're unsure about his role. They have Geno Stone there. They brought in Von Bell. Maybe there's a question right now early in training camp, like, is he going to start? He better, because I think he's the best defensive back they have, the best safety they have in general. I mean, last season, he took over for 8 games as a starter middle of the season. In those 8 games, he had 59 tackles, which is an average of 7.4. Not somebody who's like going to get sacks, or I think he had 1 pick in those 8 starts. But when we talk about tackles, he's a safe floor. I think that he's down this far because the role is a little bit uncertain, but it would not be surprising to me at all if he is named the starter from day one. I think he held his own. He did what he had to do to become the starting safety for this year. Last year, he filled that role tremendously. So I think it's mostly Von Bell was brought in here for like a veteran role. I'd be surprised if he's the starting safety. I think Jordan Battle is definitely going to be the starter there week 1. And if not, you put him on your watch list and you pick him up when the time comes. But I definitely think Jordan Battle at 57 is a disservice. So he makes my honorable mention list. Next is at number 59. And that is, I'm sorry, they moved him down to 61 now. I had him at 59 yesterday. Now he's down to 61. So even better value. Ifeatu Melifonwu from Detroit. I know a lot of hype. I mentioned Brian Branch. Reports came out that he was last year was a slot corner. Now he's going to play some safety. Maybe that's the reason why Melifonwu got dropped down a bit here. But we're still talking about someone with tremendous upside at 59 overall or 61 overall. But what is his role going to be? This is not somebody who I'm drafting and starting as my DB2 right away, but I definitely have him on the watch list, and he's definitely close to heart because last season he picked up. I'm sure if you were in the fantasy playoffs, you were using Melifonwu in a deeper league. In his 5 games started towards the end of the year, he totaled 26 tackles, which is right over 5. It's nothing to write home about, but he did have 2 sacks and 2 interceptions. So, we talk about Detroit being a good team. They're probably going to be up on teams. They're going to have to throw. Keep an eye on this one through training camp. If Melifonwu is deemed a starter, I think he is worth a stab here. Like I said, not dependable enough to start right away, but if he has 6 or 7 tackles in a splash play week 1, I'm definitely jumping on the bandwagon for week 2 and not looking back. I think he has great, tremendous upside. He showed that last year, and it's just about his role at this point. So Melifonwu at 61. Moving on to my next guy. I've seen this guy in some best balls get drafted, and that's DeMarco Hellams from Atlanta. We didn't see much out of him as a rookie, so this is mostly a hunch yet, but I've heard a lot of hype about him. People in deeper leagues are on him already, and I think you should be too, at least know the name. I think he might make that year 2 leap. I mean, he led Alabama in tackles as a safety in 2022. Didn't get the really fair shake last year. They really don't have much going on. I think they still have Jalen Hawkins. But other than that, I mean, it's nothing really to write home about there in Atlanta as far as defensive backs. Man, I mean, if he can make that year 2 leap, I think Hellams is definitely somebody with upside. Definitely not somebody I'm banking on, but he makes this list as an honorable mention because if you're in a deeper league, I definitely think he's not going to get drafted or he's going to get overlooked. And, you can definitely pounce on the upside if there is some. So Hellams makes the list. Moving on to a Steeler now is going to be at 67, DeShon Elliott. I like DeShon Elliott. Actually, I think he's going to play for 14 or more manager leagues out there. If you're in a 14, 16-man league, I think DeShon Elliott at some point in the season is going to be owned. Last year, 2023, he had over, I want to say it was 13 tackles. He had over 10 tackles his first game. I thought it was boom. It was money in the bank for the rest of the year. Then the whole middle of the season after week 1, week 2 through, I want to say 16, he really didn't live up to the hype. I think he was a couple 1 or 2 tackle game performances really let us down. But at the end of the season, those last 2 games, he backed that up with double-digit tackle performance again. And we're talking about a guy who's not like, crippling at 32 years old. He's in his mid-late 20s here. The last 3 out of 4 years, he's had 80 or more tackles. One of those teams he played for was the Ravens. Now he's, playing for my Steelers. I just think it's a great signing, not only for the Steelers, as far as like, getting an inside competitive edge on the Ravens locker room. They did that with Patrick Queen too. But I think, man, he's shown that he can do it before. And he was great for the Ravens. He was great for the Lions. So I think he'll be great for the Steelers. And I think he's going to start right next to Minkah Fitzpatrick. And this is definitely a guy who's getting overlooked right now. So DeShon Elliott, like I said, I think in 14-man leagues, he's going to be on the map at some point. So you might want to get ahead on this one, at least put him on the watch list. Moving on, we have another rookie I had mentioned before, and that is 69. Not only a good number, but a good player. Cole Bishop from Buffalo, the rookie. This is a guy who, besides Tyler Nubin, this is my number 2 safety rookie. I think he's definitely going to get starting role at some point, whether it be week 1 or week 3. Right now, it's as it stands, they have Buffalo has Mike Edwards there. They still have DeMar Hamlin, another Pitt guy from Pittsburgh. I like DeMar Hamlin too, but after that injury, I'm just not sure he can return to that IDP role that we saw a few years ago. So not only do they have guys left, they no longer have Micah Hyde. They no longer have Jordan Poyer. He's in Miami. So Cole Bishop, I think is definitely in a good spot if he can secure that starting role to make some damage here for IDP teams. And he's 69 overall. This is undrafted. Maybe someone, is a Buffalo fan and they draft this guy, but just being so low in the rankings, I think he's kind of off the radar, and it kind of works out as a sleeper pick here. I think, would not be surprised at all if Cole Bishop is in a 14-man league and 2 defensive backs. If you're starting 2, if he's in that conversation for a starter at some point. So you might want to mark this one down on the watch list. If he's not a starter by week 1, I wouldn't consider drafting him. I'd wait on it. But if he is a starter, I think that next to Taylor Rapp, Cole Bishop is a free safety. I think that he's definitely going to return some value here. So another value pick. Moving on to number 79, we have Javon Bullard. I've done a lot of rookie best ball drafts. I've done a lot of offseason 16, 18-man IDP drafts where I've seen Javon Bullard picked above Cole Bishop. I've seen him picked above Tyler Newman. And I get that there's hype there, but they also have Xavier McKinney. And going back to what I said about McKinney is like, what safeties from Green Bay have ever been that great, that well heralded in the IDP community. So I could see the upside. I think Javon Bullard's in a great spot. He's going to get a starting role, no doubt. But to me, I'm just not – I'm with Fantasy Pros on this one. I think 79 is a hell of a lot low for him. I think he should be a little bit higher than some of these other guys. But like his former teammate, number 78, Darnell Savage, I'm not really interested in him. I think I'd rather have Bullard than Savage. Rather have Bullard than a couple guys above him too. But this is somebody who, maybe guys were right drafting him over the other two rookies. This is just another guy who I think has the upside, but I'm not going to really bank on him. This might be a mid-season pickup for me. So, but Javon Bullard, I think definitely has potential. If not this year, maybe in the next year for IDP. So maybe keep him on your waiver or your watch list too. Moving on, number 100. We have Antonio Johnson from Jacksonville, a 5th-round pick last year. Really didn't get much playing time, kind of like a DeMarco Hellams. Will he make that year 2 leap? He did have a sack last year. I want to say towards the end of the year for Jacksonville. I think he was the leader of their backfield as far as sacks with one. So I think Antonio Johnson by default is going to be a starter there. Come on now. He's playing next to Andre Cisco. Andre Cisco to me is – I've seen him be high in rankings, and I just don't get it. I think Rayshawn Jenkins leaving is a huge factor here for Antonio Johnson. He takes his role next to Cisco, and I think that, Rayshawn Jenkins was a pretty damn good player in Jacksonville, and I think if there's somebody who I'd roster out of this Jacksonville pairing, I think it's going to be on Antonio Johnson. I'll take the upside, and I don't think either of these players, besides of a deep league redraft, need to be drafted, but if he watch him for week 1, because if he comes out with 7 or 8 tackles, I think it's real. I think he has potential to do damage here in his year number 2. And Antonio Johnson is definitely going to be someone who's on my watch list. And finally, all the way down, this is one of my favorite rookies, man. I think, I think LA's got something right. And that's number 157. That's Cam Kinchens. Number 1, man, I believe in like good storylines, good juju, man. If LA has that Cam Kinchens, that Cam special, I think that's something special. And, I think it could happen. It could come to fruition. This is a guy who was talked about as being one of the top safeties in the NFL draft this year. All he has in front of him, I think, is John Johnson. Maybe I think they're playing Quentin Lake at the slot corner position. So, the opportunity is there for Cam Kinchens. Is Sean McVay going to lean on him? He likes his vets, but Cam Kinchens, is somebody. Sean McVay had a lot of rookies last year that did well on the defensive side of the ball. So why not Cam Kinchens? So, this is 157, absolutely undrafted. And this is under the impression that he's not a starter. So, if he is deemed a starter, he probably creeps up the board a good bit here, maybe into the top 100. But right now, as it stands, definitely somebody who's on my watch list, definitely somebody who I think can make noise right out of the gate next to Cam Curl. So I'm excited to see how things go, whether they roll with, Cam Curl and John Johnson III. Maybe from familiarity, John Johnson's been in the system a few years now. But Cam Kinchens, I think, maybe not replace him right away, but it won't take long. I think he's going to be a household name pretty damn soon. So that's my honorable mentions and my defensive back value picks. We are going to remove the defensive backdrop now, and I'm going to bring up the linebackers now. I have brought up the linebacker list from Fantasy Pros. Go ahead and take a look at it while I mention our next promo. So the company I work for, IDP Plus, IDP Guys, formerly known as. First off, if you haven't followed us on Twitter, IDP Guys, go ahead and follow them right now. There's an IDP Guys betting website that I highly recommend you following as well if you're into the betting realm of fantasy sports. Now, I wanted to mention right now, IDP Guys is running a promo for your first month of IDP Plus premium access for only $1. So listen, we don't just have great videos, great podcasts, great articles. We have entire suite of tools and rankings for both offense and defense, of course, plus rookie rankings, injury trackers, snap tools, premium articles, and more. So right now, what a time it is. It's fantasy football season officially. So right now you can get that first month premium content for only $1. So what you want to do is go to idpguys.org. And when you go to checkout and for your 1 month subscription, you want to use the promo code mock draft, and you will get that first month, all month, for only $1. So once again, the details for that are in the bottom of the description here of the show. So check out idpguys.org and you get your monthly subscription for only $1. Moving on to our linebackers now. You might remember me saying earlier that I don't like to invest in defensive backs early. I like to punt that position, no matter if it's a 6-man, 8-man, 18-man league. That is simply not the case here with linebackers. To me, you got to walk away with at least one top 12, top 14 linebacker because kind of like the defensive line, position. These guys have tremendous upside in the top 10, top 12, and after that, it kind of falls off. But you're in luck because there's some guys deep on this list who I think will have some tremendous value this year. So we're going to start from the top. I didn't have a top 10 defensive back, but I'll break the mold here. And I am going to mention a value here at number 7, and that is TJ Edwards, man. I love TJ Edwards. This is one of my top-ranked linebackers. I personally have him inside my top 5 for redraft this year. TJ Edwards is just a model of consistency. Last year, he played all 17 games. Again, he had a total of 155 tackles, which is tremendous. Over 9. He had 9.1 tackles per game. He gets sacks, not an alarming rate, but he does get sacks from an inside linebacker, which is impressive. He had 2.5, 8 tackles for loss, 3 interceptions, 7 pass defense, and 1 forced fumble. So this is a multifaceted player, an LB1 in high regards in my book. And I love TJ Edwards. I'm not going to be the first guy to draft Foyer in the 5th round. That's just not me. But a couple picks later, I will walk away. If TJ Edwards falls to me at 7, I'm ecstatic about that. So this is definitely a value pick in my eyes. I think he has tremendous upside in a really safe floor. So TJ Edwards is the guy who I'm hunting inside this top 8. And if not TJ Edwards, then it's got to be Alex Singleton. I mean, we're not talking dynasty play. He's knocked down a couple pegs, but even in Dynasty, I like to bank on that solid 1 or 2 years. And I think for this year in redraft, Alex Singleton is definitely a value pick at number 8. We're talking about a guy who had 177 tackles, averaged over 10. He had 10.4 tackles per game. That's his bread and butter. He's not somebody who's going to, get interceptions. He didn't have one last year. He had 2 sacks, which is fine. He had 6 tackles for loss, 4 pass defense, no forced fumbles. And I'm not here for all that sexy jazz with Alex Singleton, man. If you follow IDP Plus Bets already, you saw my video that I project him to be the number 1 as far as combined tackles. I think he's going to be the leader in the NFL this year. I really do. I think, he's done before. I think he was number 7 at one point, then number 5, then number 3 last year. Here, boom. I think this is his year, Alex Singleton, to not a complete player. Like TJ Edwards, I think is more of a complete player, especially in IDP. But Alex Singleton, when we talk about tackles, and that's all I'm here for, is really the tackles. I think Alex Singleton is one of the top 2, if not top 3, linebackers in the league for this year. And I think I really like him, and I expect him to be the leading leaguer in combined tackles. So I think the sky's the limit for Singleton. This is a bad Denver Broncos team. They're going to be on the field. The defense is going to be on the field a lot, I expect, at least. So Alex Singleton here. We got TJ Edwards at number 7, Singleton at 8. I think these are my 2 smash plays at the top 10. And I'd be surprised, honestly, if Alex Singleton is the 8th linebacker off the board. Somebody's going to have that hunch too. So I expect him to probably go maybe 6 at latest. So if you have the 6th linebacker top 5 off the board and you have to pick 6, I would rather I would make the argument to pick TJ Edwards or Alex Singleton next. So really like one of those guys as my number 1. If I don't get them and you want to punt a little bit further, that's okay, because there's guys down here. Moving on, we have number 12. I like a lot, Azeez Al-Shaair. Now Azeez, maybe he's not in such a great position. Last year, he was that run stuffer for Tennessee. He had a really great fantasy, fruitful, landing spot there in Tennessee coming from San Fran. But now he goes to Houston with D'Amico Ryans. And on one hand, this is a great player who has a safe tackle floor. Last season in 17 games, he averaged 9.6 for a total of 163. Anytime you get more than 150 tackles, in my eyes, you're a DB or you're LB1. So Azeez Al-Shaair is definitely there as a top 12 linebacker already. But, it could go two ways. We saw last year with Houston's linebackers, they had Blake Cashman, they had Denzel Perryman, Christian Harris. They all kind of flashed in, their own separate times and were a bit inconsistent over time. So maybe that happens with Azeez Al-Shaair, but at the same time, Cashman's gone, Perryman's gone. It's him and Harris is really who it is there. And I really do expect not too much of a change for Azeez Al-Shaair. I think this is a pretty safe, top 12 get here. 9.6 averaging tackles a game. Maybe that comes down a little bit, but if he can stay above 8.5, 9, if he averages 9 tackles a game, that's a tremendous, lower side LB1 because, again, he's not somebody who's going to get much sacks. He had 2 sacks last year, which is good for him. I don't know if he's going to replicate that this year with how good their line is. Will Anderson up front, other guys there too. So maybe is just a run stuffer, and that's okay. That's more than fine. He held his own in that regard. As far as last year, he also had 9 tackles for loss, no picks. He had 4 pass defense and no forced fumbles. So again, if he doesn't have to do better than he did last year. If he can give me what he did last year, which is not a given, but I think he's going to come close, if not, produce the same level as last year. So I like Azeez Al-Shaair as a value pick at number 12. Now I'm going to skip a little bit here. Down to number 27. I mean, we have some good guys. CJ Mosley's great. Bernard's great, but then you got Milano coming back. Levante David, maybe Father Time catches up. Probably not. He's a beast. Quincy Williams. These are guys who I can understand the case for. I just think that, their price tag is high. Quay Walker, Kaiser White, I like a lot, but, I don't know what the defense is going to look like there. This is still top 20 price tag. That's pretty hefty. But I'm going to skip down to number 27. I mean, this guy, Devin Lloyd, was a borderline LB1 at times, if not one of the highest floor LB2s there is out there. He only played 15 games. He missed 2 games, but in those 15 games, he totaled 127 tackles. This is a strictly tackles guy for me. You're not really getting much splash plays with Devin Lloyd. Maybe that hurts you with your scoring, but again, something that happens. Are you going to count on something that happens 127 times or, 3 or 4 with sacks? So you just got to pick your poison. But if you're chasing tackles like me, Devin Lloyd is a great get here at 27. This is, if you're in a 12-man league, this is now LB3 status. So Devin Lloyd is absolutely a value pick here at 27. No sacks last year, 2 tackles for loss, no picks, 7 pass defense, and no forced fumbles. So, not the sexiest pick, but if you're chasing tackles like me, I really do respect the hell out of Devin Lloyd. He's definitely going to have a spot on my roster. Moving on past number 27, Devin Lloyd, we have 2 picks behind. Number 29, EJ Speed. Now, EJ Speed played 16 games last year. He's a little bit older. He's 29 years old. It took him a while, kind of like a Zaire Franklin, his teammate. Zaire Franklin effect, took him a while to earn his role there in Indianapolis, but boy, did he. In his last 5 games, man, if you're here already, EJ Speed, you're already on him. But I just want to reiterate, in his last 5 games last year, he averaged 11 in his last 5 games for a total of 55 tackles. So, the 6.4 average per game does not do him justice. He was tremendous in the home stretch last year. Probably was on your fantasy, either yours or somebody else's fantasy IDP team. And he probably was a standout, helped that team win a couple games late in the season, if not in the playoffs. And I think he can continue that pace this year. I think the 6.4 tackles per game comes up actually to maybe 7.5, 8. I think he's, a great get this year at 29 overall. Again, LB2, this is mid-range LB2 status in a 12-man league. 29 is a little bit low for him. That's why he's considered a value pick. You're probably going to have to spend a little bit more. I could see him, going inside the top 20, top 25 for sure. So you might have to jump a little bit on it, but I like him even at 20. I mean, we got guys like Quay Walker. Can he stay healthy? Logan Wilson, he's been so splash play dependent. Quincy Williams, can he repeat it? Kaiser White, can he stay healthy? Patrick Queen, now he's in Pittsburgh. Usually Pittsburgh doesn't have top-notch LB1. So it's like there's flaws with these guys above, but I really don't see many flaws with EJ Speed's game, and I like him a lot. And I think he's a safe floor, high ceiling kind of player. If he can get those double-digit tackle games again, you're going to get tremendous value here with Speed. So not somebody who's going to do much in the splash plays. He had 1 sack last season in all those 16 games, but he did have 12 tackles for loss. So it's not like he doesn't get in the backfield. Out of all these players, these linebackers I'm going to mention, he was actually tied with Demario Davis, who I'll talk about later, for the most tackles for loss with 12. So he's good in that regard. No picks. He had 4 pass defense and 3 forced fumbles. So not exactly like a Devin Lloyd, like nothing else besides the tackles. He has more to offer than that, and just as high of upside. So when we're talking about, right on the cusp of 30, I definitely think EJ Speed's a little bit, looked down on in these rankings, disrespected. So I like him a lot this year. But again, somebody who's other people are probably on by this point. They have a good taste in their mouth about last year, how it ended for Speed. We even saw Zaire Franklin's tackles dip later in the season when EJ Speed kind of broke out on his own. So maybe it tempers expectations for Zaire Franklin. To me, I'm not drafting Franklin. He's not on this list. I'm letting somebody else get it. I'll take EJ Speed. Moving on, the guy right after him, number 30, Jordan Hicks. Jordan Hicks, I mean, I get it. He's, maybe in his low 30s now. He missed a couple games last year, suffered that compound fracture in his leg, and could have been infected. I thought it was going to be a lot worse. I thought Ivan Pace was going to really take over, for the whole season. But actually, Jordan Hicks ended up coming back. So that impressed me. I mean, this is a guy who's been having no trouble with health throughout his career, at least through his good stretches, in Arizona and Philly. This is a guy who's safe as far as tackles. He averaged 7.6 last year for a total of 107 in 14 games. He got a sack. He had 4 tackles for loss. He had a pick, 5 pass defense, also a forced fumble. Now he moves away from Minnesota and comes to the AFC North, where we like to run the ball a hell of a lot. So, he's going to I definitely think he's going to take value away from Jeremiah Owusu Koromoa. I think out of those 2 guys, I prefer by a mile to take Jordan Hicks over JOK. JOK is definitely going to be the more competent, more higher upside as far as like splash plays, sacks, tackles for loss, no doubt about that. But I'm here for the tackles, man. And I think Jordan Hicks, when we talk about 107 tackles in 14 games, if he can stay healthy, play 16 or 17 games, this is definitely a guy who's going to get 120, 130 tackles. So this is tremendous value here at number 30. I like Hicks a lot, and I'm not worried about age. Maybe that's a reason why he got dropped down in the rankings. Maybe it's because he's playing a new team. Maybe the rankers like JOK a lot. I personally don't. I think it was kind of a fluke for JOK. Maybe he has a nice year again, but he's going to need those sacks because he's not a guy who's getting 120, 130 tackles like Jordan Hicks. So that's my linebacker to own for Cleveland. So we have Jordan Hicks at number 30. Then I'm going to slide it down the ranks a good bit here to number 37. Man, just Mr. Dependable, and that's Demario Davis from New Orleans Saints. Demario Davis last year actually led linebackers with 6.5 sacks, which is like, wow. I mean, I did not see that coming. Especially as he gets into his mid-30s. He did stellar last year. He had 121 tackles in 17 games, which is good for an average of 7.1 a game. He's helping you in that regard. This is now LB3. If you're in a 12-man league, this is LB3 status. And it just – Demario Davis is getting so disrespected here. I don't see any competition like Pete Werner. I thought he was going to do better last year. Even when he was healthy, he didn't – the tackles weren't there for Werner. They got Jalen Ford, a younger guy. But outside of that, man, it's Demario Davis' show again in 2024 for the Saints. So I expect him to be a leader, not only on the field, but as far as IDP too. Those 6.5 sacks led the league for all linebackers. He also had 12, how I mentioned before, him and EJ Speed tied on this list for the highest tackles for loss. You got 6.5 sacks, 12 tackles for loss. No picks. That's all right. I don't absolutely need them. He had 4 pass defense, and he also had 1 forced fumble. So Demario Davis, very safe floor, very high ceiling. To be at number 37, I think is disrespectful for him. And, as long as he can stay healthy, I don't care that he's 33, 34 years old. I love him, and he's definitely a guy on my radar. So Demario Davis at number 37. I'm surprised to see this next guy so low, and that's Ivan Pace Jr. Maybe the news that he got the green dot. He is going to wear the green dot. It's not going to be Blake Cashman. It's going to be Ivan Pace, which maybe you might be saying, oh, like I liked him coming off the line, getting those 2.5 sacks. Like those 2.5 sacks. He played 17 games, but I tell you what, he wasn't really a starter in all those 17 games. He really came in maybe a third through the season and really, made a name for himself as an undrafted free agent. I loved Ivan Pace last year. He was a big sleeper of mine. Not beginning of the year, I can't call that, but once he, got week 1, week 2, and I saw what he was doing, and Brian Asamoah, he got a spot taken by Ivan Pace. I'm like, man, this guy can play. So maybe that news that he's gotten the green dot has not been reflected in these rankings. I do expect him to be a little bit higher, maybe 35 to top 25 even. But I don't know if I'd jump in the top 20 for him, but I'd say 25. I'd still say he's a value pick. Ivan Pace, I mean, last year like I said, he played all 17 games, but he wasn't a starter for all those 17 games. He still averaged by the end 102 total tackles, good for an average of 6 a game. If he can stay healthy for all 17 games, absolutely he's going to average more tackles than 6. I could see him pushing 8 or more tackles a game. He's going to be a leader there. He's a freaking fire hydrant there. He's a short guy, stocky guy. He's going to hit like a mother. So I like Ivan Pace a lot. 2.5 sacks last year, 2 tackles for loss, an interception, 2 pass defense, and forced fumble. Probably not a guy who I'm really banking on as far as other stats besides tackles. I do expect him, because he's a good coming off the line. I do expect him to get a couple sacks, and that's all nice. That's fine and dandy. But when it comes to just tackles, I think that average, like I'd mentioned, it's not going to be 6. It's going to be somewhere closer to 8 or more tackles a game. So not worried about Blake Cashman. I mean, I liked Blake Cashman coming out of college. It took him a while to get going. Last year, I was not surprised Cashman did well, but I would be surprised if Cashman did that well in Minnesota this year. And I think it's just going to be the Ivan Pace Jr. show all the way. So at 41 right now, if you're drafting tomorrow or the next day and he's at 41, I'm licking my chops at that. Moving on, we got number 45, Christian Harris from Houston. I'd mentioned him and Azeez Al-Shaair are going to be the 1-2 punch there. Thank God, we get rid of Denzel Perryman there. Blake Cashman leaves. Like, hopefully those two can just be the stability, the consistent inside linebackers there for D'Amico Ryans. I hopefully that's the way it plays out. I don't see why not. Christian Harris is a great player. He had 4 games actually last year with 10 or more tackles. He ended the season with their playoff ride in a really good note. I think he had 7 tackles, 1 playoff game with a sack and a pick. And then the next one, I believe, was 8 tackles. So, like, man, you have when a player gets you 4 double-digit tackle games, and that player was not even starting every game, like, now he gets the chance. I think Christian Harris, not saying like I depend on him as my LB1 or, he's the safest floor LB2. There might be some peaks and valleys with Christian Harris, but I'm willing to make him an LB2. If I'm somebody who I'm not going to put a lot of draft stock in linebackers, I think he could be your LB2, and you could really get tremendous value on your offense, your depth, your wide receivers. Load up on there, man, and come back and get Christian Harris at 45. Tremendous last year. 16 games played. He averaged 6.3 tackles a game, 2 sacks, 7 tackles for loss, no interceptions, 7 pass defense, and also 1 forced fumble. And I think the sky's the limit for Harris. Nice linebacker coming out of Alabama there. And I think this year he puts it all together. So as the season gets creeps closer, I think Christian Harris is definitely going to be top 30, maybe top 25, push for it. Somebody's going to reach for him like that, kind of like an EJ Speed type of player. People are on to Christian Harris, but if he falls, don't let him get too far down in the rankings before it's too late, because I think the upside is tremendous with Harris. Moving on to number 47, 2 spots after Christian Harris, we got Jerome Baker. And Jerome Baker, listen, is not somebody who's going to have like 100. He had 126 tackles for Miami, his best year. I don't even bank on him having 125 tackles. But I think he's pretty safe to get over 100 tackles. I mean, last year he was on pace. He had 13 games played before he got injured with 78 tackles with an average of 6 a game. So he would have hit 100 tackles had he played a full season in Miami. And that's a position where he, although playing inside linebacker, he was somebody who also This is a multifaceted player. He's getting sacks too. I think he had 5 or 6 sacks one season, a couple seasons ago for Miami. Last year in those 13 games played, he had 1.5 sacks, 2 tackles for loss, 2 interceptions, 3 pass defense, and no forced fumbles. But I'm be interested to see how it shakes up in training camp here with Seattle. Maybe I think he is going to wear the green dot over Tyrell Dodson. Another guy, it's like I'm not really banking on is Tyrell Dodson. I know a lot of people are high on him, but I don't know what he can do in a full-time role. I mean, we didn't really see it in Buffalo, and he had his games where he was a starter and did well. But I think Jerome Baker. I mean, again, they got Bobby Wagner's out. That he was a tremendous tackler. We all know that. Jordan Brooks is out, tremendous tackler, bad in pass coverage, but he's gone too. They actually switch roles, Baker and Brooks. They switch teams, but I think Jerome Baker here in Seattle, if I'm picking one of the 2 linebackers there, it's especially at average draft position, it's going to be Jerome Baker. I think Tyrell Dodson might be a guy who might intrigue other managers, but Jerome Baker, I'm just going to take this safe, maybe 110, 120 tackles with a couple sacks. And I think this is, if he's wearing the green dot, he's going to be out there, damn near close to 100% snaps if he can hold up. And I think Jerome Baker at 47 is getting a little bit slept on here. So I love Jerome Baker at this average draft position. Moving on, we have at number 55. This is a guy I'm surprised he's so low. I've seen, I had mentioned those best ball leagues, those IDP specific best ball leagues I've done. I've seen Trent Simpson go in like round 6, 7, very early, very, very early. Now, there's 2 ways that I see Trent Simpson this year for Baltimore. So in one regard, they have Roquan Smith last year. For the last 2 years, they had Roquan Smith and Patrick Queen. What a dynamic duo those guys were. The worst you could say is Patrick Queen was like a mid-tier LB2. He was an LB1 in my book. Obviously Roquan's one of the best, but now they lose Patrick Queen. Maybe on one hand, Trenton Simpson in year 2 makes that leap. He is like a Patrick Queen type player, Patrick Queen type IDP production. I could see that. But at the same time, don't get your hopes up completely. Remember, before they had the dynamic duo of Roquan and Patrick Queen, they had, for a few years, they had LJ Fort, they had Patrick Onwuasor. So it's like, I mean, I'm torn on this one. It's like 60-40. I think Trenton Simpson does hit, but don't get too crazy with the hype. It could definitely go either way. I mean, LJ Fort, Patrick Onwuasor, like those guys were not IDP friendly whatsoever. So this situation is there for him to, definitely make the jump in year 2. The opportunity is there, but there's absolutely some risk involved. So Roquan obviously gets the advantage, and his stocks only goes higher, losing Patrick Queen. But Trenton Simpson, I do think at 55, I would take a stab here. He's probably going to go earlier than that. Somebody's going to have that hunch too. But if he goes at top 35, let him. I don't think it's really necessary to draft him and start him right away. I mean, but I would not be surprised if he did do well. But I'm torn on that one. Like I said, 60-40, he does well. But at 55, I take the stab too. Moving on to 56, this is a guy who I'm surprised is that low because he's a starter right away. Like we've kind of seen Cody Barton do really well in the past as far as tackles. Maybe if your scoring is sack heavy or interception heavy, is definitely going to knock him down a peg. But hey, 121 tackles in 14 games played last season. That's good for 8.7. Which 8.7 is higher than Devin Lloyd. 8.7 is higher than EJ Speed, than Jordan Hicks, than Demario Davis, Pace, Christian Harris, Jerome Baker, all those guys. Like Cody Barton can tackle. There's no doubt about that. I think actually in Denver, I would rather have him in Denver than I would Josie Jewell in Denver. I know Josie Jewell is in Carolina now, so that question's nullified and voided. But Cody Barton, I think next to Alex Singleton, maybe that's another reason why he's down here is because Alex Singleton's an absolute dog when it comes to tackles. But just wherever Cody Barton goes, and I know you can find videos of him for Seattle or Washington getting like burnt by tight ends and bad in pass coverage. That's all right. In real life, he's not such a great player all around, but in IDP, he's a tremendous player, and he gets tackles at a high rate. So Cody Barton, the number 2 inside linebacker next to Alex Singleton, definitely intrigues me for 56 overall. So Cody Barton, I mean, this is a guy who had, I think it was 3 consecutive double-digit tackle games last season, close to the playoffs. He was on many of my IDP 12-man leagues. So definitely a guy who garners attention. And if you can get him outside the top 40, 50, I think there's tremendous value here with Cody Barton. So those were my 12 linebackers that I have for value picks, surefire value. When I wouldn't say surefire with Trent and Simpson, but probable surefire value picks. Now I got some honorable mentions. I had some honorable mentions for defensive backs. I'll give you some. I'll give you 6 linebacker honorable mentions that are outside the top 55. And number 1 is going to be Junior Colson. Junior Colson ranks on this list as number 60. He was 59 yesterday. Now he's 60. So things change real quick. And, I expect it to change for the better for him and actually go higher in the rankings. Like, come on now. Junior Colson got drafted. We all know this. He played at Michigan with Harbaugh. Now he gets drafted as a rookie there. They really don't have much else. They have Denzel Perryman, but we saw how that held up in Houston last year. He was unable to stay healthy. If he does stay healthy, I think Denzel Perryman can be a good value pick himself. But it's 60 overall. Junior Colson, I think he's definitely going to get the nod there. Maybe some people, have him lower in the rankings because they're thinking, Denzel Perryman's there, Diane Henley's there. I just think that the fact that he was brought in from Harbaugh, straight as a rookie, drafted to LA with Harbaugh, I think he's definitely going to get the nod. And we're going to see those rankings definitely creep up as the season rolls around. I mean, I know a lot of people that, big IDP heads that talk good on Junior Colson. And I'm going to, join the club on that one. This is definitely a rookie who can hit the ground running and be one of the top, if not the best, rookie linebacker out there. So I like Junior Colson. He's in a great landing spot. There's not really much around him. So I think as far as tackles, opportunity for tackles is definitely there. So keep an eye on Junior Colson in the training camp. As long as he has a starting nod, he has a spot on my team. That's for damn sure. Moving on, we got number 63, Devondre Campbell. I mean, on a couple ways to see this. On one end, he's like 31 now. He had an injury-riddled season last year. Maybe Dre Greenlaw, I saw some videos on him, like, running around on the practice field. Maybe that's all in somebody's ear, like, oh, Devondre Campbell, I'm writing him off. I'm just too much risk. But if you're in a deep linebacker league, or if you're in a 14, 16-man league, you start 2 or 3 linebackers or 2 linebackers in a flex, I definitely think Devondre Campbell can be that flex, especially early on in the season. Now, hear me out. Last year, let's throw it away. He had a lot of injuries, dealt with a lot of injuries, but let's look at 2 years ago, 2022. He played 13 games, and granted, that might be what the case is this year. He might get hurt. It's a good percentage for that. He's been hurt, often in his career. But in 13 games in 2022 for the Packers, he had 96 total tackles. That's a good average for 7.4, which was more than Jerome Baker last year, more than Christian Harris, more than Ivan Pace, more than Demario Davis, more than EJ Speed's average last year. Like, Devondre Campbell can rack up tackles. There's no doubt about it. He's not somebody who's going to, get a lot of sacks. 2022, he did not have a sack, but he did have 6 tackles for loss. He did have 2 picks. He did have 3 pass defense. So he's not a complete zero in that regard. He's somebody who can do more than just tackles, but all I'm asking him to do is just make tackles for San Francisco. And let's be honest, man. I mean, San Francisco, they're probably going to make the playoffs pretty easy. They're probably going to rest Dre Greenlaw. We all know that when he comes back, he's the starter, but they can play it safe here. And I think Devondre Campbell on a 1-year deal, they're going to let him bang. They're going to, let him go out there every play and put his body on the line, try to make a payday for next year, and try to most importantly, preserve Dre Greenlaw for later in the season when the 49ers need him. So I think early on in the season, Devondre Campbell is definitely a good bet to, be a good IDP producing player. And I think he has a spot on my team, especially if I'm in a deeper league. This is somebody 63. He's getting disrespected here. People are sleeping on him for what he, did in 2022 and many seasons before that with Green Bay. So I like Devondre Campbell. I've actually drafted him in a couple of those IDP best balls, late round pick, and I think he's going to pay off. So definitely a redraft consideration here. I like him a lot if you're in a deeper league. Maybe if you want to punt the position a little bit, which I don't recommend, but if you do consider to go that route, Devondre Campbell is definitely a guy who I think early on you can bank on him to be productive early in the season before Dre Greenlaw gets back. Another guy, Moving down in the 60s is number 66. KJ Britt makes my honorable mentions. Now, KJ Britt, like damn well, he could be like a straight up value pick here if he's named the starter, which I do believe he is. But it's just a lot of questions about him. We haven't seen much history on him. I think last year was his first or second year. Like we didn't see him play really much at all, but the opportunity is definitely going to be there. Maybe he's groomed to be like the takeover for Lavonte David, but nonetheless, if he's starting next to Lavonte David as the second inside linebacker there, I definitely think he outproduces number 66 overall. I mean, you got like Jelani Tavai above him. I could see him doing something, but I think KJ Britt's upside is way higher. Nakobe Dean, I don't know that he's guaranteed a spot. Then you got, Micah McFadden, I do respect. I do like him a lot, but Divine Diablo, I think the rookie Tommy Eichenberger can outproduce him. Like Pete Werner, he's big health risk. Even when he was on the field last year, didn't do well. Jermaine Pratt, very like up and down player. Denzel Perryman, can he stay healthy? So like I'll make a case and say that KJ Britt has definitely, I don't want to say a higher floor, but he definitely has a higher ceiling than mostly all these guys down here. So KJ Britt, if you're in a deep league, make sure he gets drafted, and I think he's going to be a great value pick. Just so low in the rankings that I wouldn't say bank on him or take him early. So, but definitely you want him on your team as a sleeper. Moving on, another guy who's buried here at number 78. I mean, at this point, we got guys like Willie Gay, Jack Gibbons, Landon Roberts. I think he'll be a number 3 in Pittsburgh. I mean, we got Leo Chenal. I'm not banking on him too much. Christian Roseboom. Let's take a look at Nate Landman, okay? Hear me out. Nate Landman, on one hand, is the third inside backer, right? They have Troy Anderson. They have Caden Ellis, and then he would be number 3. Now, keep in mind, Troy Anderson was out for I believe it was a shoulder injury in week 2. He suffered. He was out the whole year. All Nate Landman did is come in and ball. He actually, if you look it up on Pro Football, he played 16 games, but he didn't play no 16 games. He didn't play in week 1. He actually only played 15 games. In those 15 games, he totaled 110 tackles, which is 7.3 a game. Again, 7.3, more than Jerome Baker, more than Christian Harris, more than Ivan Pace, more than DeMario Davis, more than EJ Speed. Like, he gets tackles. And guess what? He's not going to do much else. He actually did have 2 sacks, so I'll give him that. He will do a little bit more. 2 sacks, 7 tackles for loss, 1 pick, 3 pass defense, 3 forced fumbles. Like, yeah, he actually can do a lot more than just tackle. Nate Landman, now here's the kicker. Right now, we're probably thinking that Caden Ellis and Troy Anderson are back, and Nate Landman's out of a spot. Now, that might be the case, but what I'm reading so far is Troy Anderson. I mean, if you know him, he's such a damn good athlete that Troy Anderson, I think, is actually going to play on the line a little bit more. Like, they're going to be a little bit more toolsy with Anderson, which I think that they do that because they saw how good Nate Landman was last year. So I think him and Caden Ellis are actually the 2 inside backers when the rubber hits the road for this upcoming season. And I think because of that, Nate Landman is a tremendous value here. As long as the stars align, and that's the news when it comes to the regular season, I'm definitely interested. Definitely a guy who has like a 0 price tag, who right now, if you're drafting, this is a very great pick late, but I just see him being named the starter as inside linebacker, and I think his positive regression, I think his price tag does come up a little bit, but Nate Landman at 78, absolutely gold right now. I drafted him early a couple weeks ago in those best balls. I drafted him in almost every league. I expect him to be a starting inside linebacker, and I'm sticking my neck out for him, so he better show up for me. Nate Landman at 78. And 2 more players further down the list. This one's a deep sleeper. I mean, we saw Green Bay draft a lot of linebackers this year. Actually, 2. They drafted 2 linebackers, Hooper and Edgerrin Cooper. Hooper and Cooper, good rhyme in there. But they also have Isaiah McDuffie, and I'm actually not ready to write off Isaiah McDuffie yet. This is somebody who, when he was called upon last year, he played in 16 games, but only started 8. In those 8 games, like I said, when he was called upon to start, he was tremendous. He had 4 total double-digit tackle games in those 8. So 8 games started, 4 of them, half of them were over 10 or more tackles, which is tremendous. If Isaiah McDuffie, right now he's getting disrespected in the rankings because I wouldn't say disrespected, but he's he's not named a starter, which is why he's at number 89. But they have Quay Walker. He might get hurt himself again. He hasn't proved Iron Man status at all. And then they have Edgerrin Cooper. Like, maybe those two are the starters, and Isaiah McDuffie has to wait his turn. And when he does, he's going to be gold. Or at the same time, maybe Isaiah McDuffie, knowing the system, is going to be named the starter week 1. And I think he's going to hit the ground running in that case. Like, if he is named the starter and he's out there playing 70 or more, 70, 80% of snaps week 1, I think there's something to it. And those numbers will only go up. And I expect him to be a dog when it comes to tackles. Not a guy who's going to, break the mold in any other facet. He only had half a sack, 5 tackles for loss, no picks, 1 pass defense, no forced fumbles. So Isaiah McDuffie, although, I said he's not, held to a high standard in those other splash plays, he did have a missed tackle percentage of only 5%, which is tremendous. He is a sure tackler, and that's why he's, a great player for IDP. If he is a starter, he is absolutely on my team and absolutely worth owning. So interested to see how it plays out in Green Bay with the training camp coming up and roster spots being determined. But if he's a starter, absolutely worth it at 89. Great value here. Excuse me. And finally, my last honorable mention is Tommy Eichenberg, the rookie. Now, I know in Vegas they have Divine Diablo. They have Robert Spillane. Robert Spillane is high on this list. I believe he's in the top 20. Let's see. Robert Spillane is 22 overall. And you know what? I didn't count him on this list as a value, and I don't regret that. I think Robert Spillane kind of had a 1 year last year. You had to kind of be there. This is not somebody who I'm willing to pay the price tag on. And Divine Diablo is buried down there. I'm going to say he was at 40 or 50. And I'm not really drafting him at all. I'm not interested. And I wouldn't exactly recommend drafting Tommy Eichenberg unless you're in a dynasty league where you have some time to burn. Tommy Eichenberg, though, I do think that he is going to get, playing time right away. Not exactly starting, but keep in mind you have Spillane, who I think is a 1 year, one hit wonder. You have Divine Diablo, who is, often banged up. Missed a couple games last year himself. So I think at some point, they also have the former linebacker coach, the former NFL linebacker, Antonio Pierce, as the coach. So I think the fact that Eichenberg was the only linebacker they drafted there in Vegas. I think that, this is the first linebacker that Antonio Pierce has drafted as a head coach. There's some kind of magic here. And I just think that Tommy Eichenberg, when we look at all these rookies who are fighting for their jobs, fighting for playing time, I think Eichenberg is going to be one of the ones that actually shake out and get some legit time here and do something with it. This is not a guy who, was going to get a lot of picks, be great in pass coverage, but when he actually played, I want to say 2 games with 2 broken hands last year at Ohio State. Like, he was I want to say MVP of the Rose Bowl, or at least on the defensive side of the ball. This guy can absolutely play. He can absolutely tackle. And Las Vegas, LA, wherever they're at now. Las Vegas Rams. I think that definitely he can be a spark plug for that defense if he's called upon. I mean, he's a sure tackler, and I just think they play tough nose over there in Vegas. And I think Tommy Eichenberg is a great pick, not only for the team, but when it comes for his time, his name to be called, I think he's going to be a great IDP, kind of like a Robert Spillane type of player. Maybe not get in the backfield as much with the sacks, but sure tackler, and I think that's the role he's going to play. So Tommy Eichenberg rounds off my list there for honorable mentions. So before I send off, I just want to say, go to Trophy Smack. Like I said, get that trophy, get your draft board, go to idpguys.org, get your 1 month subscription. Thank you very much for listening. I know it was a long pod, but hopefully this is the last time I'm going to touch linebackers and defensive backs until the training camp wraps up and we're ready to start the season. So if you do draft early, make sure you took note of these honorable mentions that I had mentioned. And best of luck to you, and we will see you next time on IDP Plus Trends.
Thank you for watching the IDP Plus YouTube network. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Be sure to tap the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload new content.